There's a moment that happens in every conversation, every room you enter, every social interaction you have. Within the first 30 seconds, people make a decision about you. Not about whether they like you. That's irrelevant. They decide whether they respect you. And here's what most people don't understand. Respect isn't earned through kindness, helpfulness, or being agreeable. Those things might make people like you, but they won't make people respect you. And Machiavelli knew something that modern society has forgotten. It's better to be respected than liked, because the person who is liked can be dismissed. The person who is respected cannot. Watch how people treat the agreeable person in any group. They interrupt them. They ignore their suggestions. They take their time for granted. Now watch how they treat the person who commands respect. They listen when that person speaks. They consider their words carefully. They don't casually dismiss their presence. The difference isn't personality. It's power dynamics. And Machiavelli understood power dynamics better than anyone who ever lived. Most people think respect comes from being impressive, from showing off their achievements, their knowledge, their success. But that's not respect. That's admiration, and admiration is temporary. Respect runs deeper. Respect comes from one thing and one thing only. The certainty that crossing this person would be a mistake, not because they'll hurt you physically, but because they operate on a level you can't predict or control. And unpredictability, when combined with composure, creates something most people will never understand. Fear-based respect. Here's the brutal truth Machiavelli discovered. People don't respect what they understand completely. They respect what they can't fully figure out. The moment someone thinks they have you mapped, categorized, predicted, your power over them dissolves. But when they look at you and sense something they can't read, can't manipulate, can't control, that's when respect is born. It's not about being mysterious for the sake of it. It's about being strategically unrevealing. Think about the most respected people you know. Not the most successful, not the most talented. The ones who command respect just by walking into a room. They all share one quality. They never seem desperate for anything. Not for approval, not for validation, not even for success. They move through the world as if they already possess something everyone else is searching for. Self-containment. And that self-containment sends a message louder than words ever could. This person doesn't need you. This person isn't playing your games. This person operates by different rules. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think self-containment means being cold, aloof, or antisocial. That's not it. The truly respected person can be warm, engaging, even helpful. But underneath that warmth is steel. Underneath that engagement is boundaries. Underneath that helpfulness is choice, not obligation. When they give you their time, attention, or energy, it feels like a gift, not a given. And people instinctively respect what they can't take for granted. Machiavelli wrote about this in ways that make people uncomfortable because he stripped away all the pleasant illusions. He said the foundation of power isn't love, it's respect mixed with fear. Not fear of harm, but fear of consequences. Fear of being cut off, dismissed, or left behind. When people know that disrespecting you comes with a cost, they become naturally respectful. It's not manipulation. It's human nature. The average person gives their respect away for free. They're nice to everyone, available to everyone, accommodating to everyone. And what happens? They become background noise. People stop seeing them as individuals and start seeing them as resources. Someone to call when they need something, someone to vent to when they're frustrated, someone to fill time when they're bored. That's not respect. That's utility. And utility can be replaced. Here's the first principle of Machiavellian respect. Scarcity creates value. When your time, attention, and energy are scarce resources, people value them more. When you're selective about who gets access to you, that access becomes meaningful. When you don't respond to every text immediately, your responses carry weight. When you don't say yes to every request, your yes becomes powerful. It's not about being difficult. It's about being discerning. Most people are afraid of being disliked, so they make themselves too available, too agreeable, too accommodating. But Machiavelli understood something counterintuitive. The person who is willing to be disliked by some will be respected by all, because willingness to face disapproval signals strength. And strength, even when it makes people uncomfortable, commands respect in ways that agreeableness never will. Walk into any room and watch the dynamics. Within minutes, you'll see who really has authority and who just thinks they do. The person trying to prove their authority talks loudly, interrupts often, and needs to remind everyone of their credentials. The person who actually has authority does something much more powerful. They listen. They observe. They speak only when their words will shift the room. And when they do speak, the conversation stops. This is what Machiavelli meant by presence. It's not about being the center of attention. It's about being the center of gravity. Everything in the room becomes oriented around you, not because you demanded it, but because you commanded it through stillness, composure, and strategic silence. Most people exhaust themselves trying to be heard. The Machiavellian makes others strain to listen. Here's what happens when you master authority presence. People start asking for your opinion even when you haven't offered it. They look to see your reaction before they form their own. They modify their behavior based on whether you seem engaged or detached. You become the reference point by which others measure the room. And this happens not through force or manipulation, but through the simple act of carrying yourself like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. The secret is understanding the difference between confidence and authority. Confidence is about how you feel about yourself. Authority is about how others feel about approaching you. A confident person might be comfortable speaking up, taking risks, or expressing opinions. But an authoritative person makes others think twice before challenging them. Not because they're intimidating, but because they seem to operate from a place of such certainty that questioning them feels pointless. Watch how an authoritative person handles disagreement. They don't get defensive. They don't escalate. They don't rush to prove their point. Instead, they pause. They consider, and then they respond in a way that makes the disagreement seem small and irrelevant, not by dismissing it, but by addressing it from such an elevated perspective that everyone else feels like they missed something important. That's not arrogance. That's authority. Machiavelli knew that authority is largely theatrical. It's about managing perceptions, controlling information, and positioning yourself as someone who sees things others don't. When you speak with authority, you don't just share information. You share perspective. You don't just answer questions. You reframe them. You don't just solve problems. You reveal why they weren't really problems in the first place. Here's a technique that builds authority instantly. Never answer a question immediately. Pause for 2 to 3 seconds, even if you know the answer perfectly. That pause communicates several things simultaneously. You're thoughtful. You're not reactive. You're considering angles others haven't thought of. And most importantly, your response is going to be worth waiting for. Those few seconds of silence create anticipation, and anticipation makes people value what comes next. Authority presence also means controlling your emotional temperature. In any situation, there's usually one person who stays calm while others get heated. One person who thinks strategically while others react emotionally. One person who sees the bigger picture while others get caught up in details. Be that person. Not by suppressing emotions, but by processing them internally before they show externally. When everyone else is spinning, your stillness becomes magnetic. But here's where most people struggle. They think authority means being right all the time. That's not it. Authority means being trusted to handle being wrong. When an authoritative person makes a mistake, they don't collapse into apologies or explanations. They acknowledge it briefly and move forward with the same composure they had before. That consistency of presence is what people respect, not perfection. The physical component of authority presence is crucial. How you hold your body, where you direct your gaze, how you use space. An authoritative person doesn't fidget, doesn't fill silences with nervous gestures, doesn't seek validation through eye contact. They occupy space confidently but not aggressively. They maintain eye contact without staring. They move deliberately without rushing. Every physical choice reinforces the mental impression that this person is in control of themselves, which makes others assume they're in control of the situation. Machiavelli observed that people follow those who seem to know something they don't. Authority presence is about cultivating that perception without being deceptive. It's about carrying yourself like someone who has access to information, insights, or perspectives that aren't immediately obvious to everyone else. And here's the key, often you actually do. Most people are so focused on reacting to what's happening that they miss the deeper patterns. When you train yourself to see those patterns and respond from that level, your authority becomes genuine, not performed. There's something most people refuse to acknowledge about human nature. We respect what we can't control more than what we can. The person who's always available loses respect. The person who's always agreeable loses respect. The person who always says yes loses respect, not because they're bad people, but because predictability breeds contempt. And Machiavelli understood that a certain kind of fear, properly applied, creates lasting respect in ways that pure kindness never will. This isn't about being cruel or harmful. It's about being unpredictable in your boundaries. When people know they can push you around, they will. When people know they can take advantage of your good nature, they will. When people know you'll always be there no matter how they treat you, they'll treat you poorly. But when people understand that crossing you comes with consequences they can't predict or control, they become respectful by default. Watch how people interact with someone they respect versus someone they like. With someone they like, they're casual, familiar, sometimes even careless. They interrupt, they make assumptions, they take liberties. With someone they respect, they're careful. They think before they speak. They consider how their words might be received. They maintain a level of formality even in informal settings. That difference is fear. Not terror, but healthy fear. The fear of losing access, losing favor, or facing consequences. Here's how this works in practice. Let's say someone consistently shows up late to meetings with you. The agreeable person either says nothing or makes gentle comments that get ignored. The respected person does something different. They leave. Not angrily, not with explanations, just calmly. I had blocked this time for our meeting. Let's reschedule when you can be here at the agreed time. Then they leave. No argument, no discussion, no second chances in that moment. What happens? The late person is suddenly forced to confront the consequence of their disrespect. They realize that their behavior has cost them something they valued. And here's the crucial part. They start being on time. Not because they're afraid of anger or confrontation, but because they're afraid of losing access to someone they now realize they can't take for granted. That's respect through fear. Clean, non-emotional, and devastatingly effective. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he was talking about a specific kind of fear, not the fear that comes from cruelty or unpredictability, but the fear that comes from knowing that this person has standards you cannot violate without consequences. People respect boundaries more than they respect kindness because boundaries require strength to maintain while kindness can come from weakness. The key is consistency. If you set a boundary and don't enforce it, you've just taught people that your boundaries don't matter. If you make a consequence clear and don't follow through, you've just shown that your words have no weight. But if you consistently and calmly enforce your standards, people learn to respect those standards automatically. They start policing themselves around you because they don't want to test what will happen if they don't. This creates what Machiavelli would call beneficial fear. People become careful around you not because they're terrified, but because they value the relationship enough to avoid jeopardizing it. They think before they speak because they know you won't tolerate disrespect. They show up on time because they know you won't wait. They keep their word because they know you remember when they don't. That carefulness is respect in action. But here's the sophisticated part. You don't have to be harsh or cold to implement this principle. You can be warm, generous, even loving, while maintaining the underlying structure that creates respect. The difference is that your warmth comes from choice, not obligation. Your generosity comes from abundance, not desperation. Your love comes from strength, not need. And people feel that difference even if they can't articulate it. The person who commands respect through this principle never threatens or warns. They simply act. When someone crosses a line, there's no dramatic confrontation, no emotional outburst, no long explanation of why they're disappointed. There's just a consequence. Clean, swift, and proportional. The message becomes clear through action, not words. This person has standards, and those standards are non-negotiable. This principle extends beyond personal relationships into every area of life. In business, the respected professional is the one who delivers exceptional work but won't tolerate scope creep. In social settings, the respected friend is the one who's fun to be around, but won't accept disrespectful treatment. In romantic relationships, the respected partner is the one who loves deeply, but won't compromise their core values. The pattern is consistent: high value, clear boundaries, swift consequences. Machiavelli understood that fear and respect are two sides of the same coin. When people fear losing access to your value, they respect the conditions required to maintain that access. It's not personal fear, it's positional fear. They're not afraid of you as a person, they're afraid of losing their position in your life. And that fear motivates the kind of careful, considerate behavior that we call respect. Most people are terrified of silence. They fill every pause with words, every gap with explanations, every moment of stillness with nervous energy. But Machiavelli understood something that modern society has forgotten. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the most powerful form of communication there is. And the person who masters strategic silence controls every conversation, every negotiation, every social dynamic they enter. Here's what happens when you speak too much. You give people too much information to use against you. You reveal your thought process, your insecurities, your desperation. You provide ammunition for those who want to undermine you and blueprints for those who want to manipulate you. But when you speak strategically, when you let silence do the heavy lifting, people are forced to fill in the blanks themselves, and they almost always fill them in your favor. Think about the most powerful moments in any conversation. They're not when someone is speaking. They're the pauses before the important words, the silence after a significant statement, the moments when everyone is waiting to see what happens next. Those moments of tension, of anticipation, of uncertainty, that's where power lives. And the person who can create those moments, sustain them, and use them strategically, controls the entire interaction. Watch what happens when you don't immediately respond to an accusation. The person who made it starts to squirm. They begin to doubt themselves. They wonder if they overstepped, if they misunderstood something, if they just revealed more about themselves than about you. That discomfort makes them vulnerable. And vulnerability in the person trying to attack you is how you know the power has shifted. Strategic silence works because it forces the other person to project onto you. When you don't react, they have to interpret your non-reaction. And because humans are naturally self-critical, they usually interpret it in ways that make them question themselves rather than you. Did I go too far? Did I misread the situation? Am I making myself look bad? Your silence becomes a mirror that shows them their own insecurity. But this isn't about being passive or withdrawn. Strategic silence is active. It's choosing not to speak because speaking would weaken your position. It's letting the other person reveal themselves while you remain protected. It's using the human inability to tolerate awkwardness as a weapon that costs you nothing to deploy. Here's how it works in different contexts. In negotiations, when they make an offer, don't respond immediately. Let the silence stretch. Often they'll start negotiating with themselves, offering concessions you never asked for just to fill the uncomfortable quiet. In conflict, when someone attacks you verbally, don't rush to defend. Let their words hang in the air, becoming more obviously petty and emotional with each passing second. In social situations, when someone tries to put you on the spot, don't feel pressured to perform. Your calm refusal to be rattled often impresses people more than any clever response could. Machiavelli knew that the person who speaks first in a standoff usually loses. They reveal their hand, show their desperation, or demonstrate their need to fill the void. But the person who can sit comfortably in silence, who can let tension build without breaking, holds all the power. They become the one everyone else is trying to read, trying to please, trying to get a reaction from. And that position of being the sought-after response is where respect is born. The key is learning to be comfortable with discomfort. Most people break silence because it feels awkward, not because they have something important to say. But awkwardness is just a feeling, and feelings pass. The person who can sit with awkwardness without acting on it has mastered one of the most important social skills there is. They can watch others reveal themselves through their inability to tolerate the same discomfort. Strategic silence also means knowing when your words will have maximum impact. Instead of constantly contributing to conversations, you wait. You listen. You observe. And then, when the moment is right, you speak with precision. Because you've been silent, people listen more carefully when you finally talk. Because you've been selective, your words carry more weight. Because you've been patient, your timing is better. This creates what Machiavelli would recognize as psychological leverage. People start seeking your approval because it's rare. They value your opinion because it's not freely given. They respect your presence because it's not guaranteed. Your silence has made your voice more valuable, your attention more precious, your approval more meaningful. But the most sophisticated use of strategic silence is how it reveals the true nature of the people around you. When you don't immediately fill silences, respond to provocations, or seek to smooth over tensions, you get to see how others handle discomfort. Some people respect your approach and mirror it. Others become desperate for your validation and reveal their neediness. Still others become hostile, because they can't control you through normal social pressures. Your silence sorts people into categories without you having to evaluate them directly. The person who masters strategic silence never has to defend themselves, because they never give their enemies enough information to attack effectively. They never have to prove their worth because their restraint demonstrates their value. They never have to fight for respect because their composure commands it automatically. This is the essence of Machiavellian social dynamics: winning without fighting, controlling without force, commanding without demanding. There comes a moment in mastering Machiavellian respect when you cross a line that most people never approach. You stop caring about individual opinions and start caring about your overall position. You stop reacting to specific provocations and start responding from a place of strategic clarity. You stop defending yourself against attacks and start using those attacks to demonstrate your elevation above petty concerns. This is what Machiavelli would call becoming untouchable. Untouchable doesn't mean isolated or cold. It means that you've developed such internal certainty, such clear boundaries, such consistent standards that external pressures can't move you from your position. People can attack you, criticize you, try to manipulate you, but none of it changes how you see yourself or how you operate in the world. And that consistency, that unshakable self-possession, creates a form of respect that borders on awe. Watch how people treat someone they perceive as untouchable. They become more careful with their words. They think twice before making casual criticisms. They wonder what this person knows that they don't. They assume there must be something special about someone who seems so immune to the social pressures that affect everyone else. And often, they start seeking approval from this person, even though that person never asked for it. Here's the paradox of untouchable authority. The less you need respect, the more you command it. The less you chase approval, the more people want to give it to you. The less you defend yourself, the more others feel compelled to defend you. It's as if your indifference to the normal social games makes people assume you're playing a more sophisticated game that they don't understand. This principle shows up in every area of life. The employee who isn't desperate to please becomes the one management notices. The romantic partner who doesn't need constant validation becomes the one their partner values most. The friend who doesn't chase social approval becomes the one everyone wants to impress. The common thread is emotional independence. When you don't need what others have to offer emotionally, you become valuable to them in ways that neediness never creates. But becoming untouchable requires a fundamental shift in how you measure success. Instead of measuring by how many people like you, you measure by how consistently you maintain your standards. Instead of measuring by how much approval you receive, you measure by how little you need it. Instead of measuring by how many conflicts you avoid, you measure by how effectively you handle the ones that find you. This shift from external validation to internal consistency is what creates unshakable authority. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous person is not the one who attacks first, but the one who never needs to attack at all. When you've built your life in such a way that you don't depend on others for your sense of worth, security, or happiness, you become immune to the social manipulations that control most people. You can't be guilted into compliance, shamed into submission, or flattered into poor decisions, because none of those tactics address any real need you have. This immunity creates what appears to be supernatural confidence. You walk into rooms differently. You respond to provocations differently. You handle success and failure differently. People notice this difference even if they can't articulate what they're seeing. And because they can't understand the source of your composure, they attribute it to some special knowledge or power that you possess. Often they're right. The knowledge is self-knowledge. The power is self-possession. The untouchable person never explains their decisions to people who aren't affected by them. They never justify their boundaries to people who want to cross them. They never defend their values to people who don't share them. Not because they're arrogant, but because they understand that explanation implies the other person has a right to judge. And giving someone the right to judge you gives them power over you. Instead, the untouchable person operates from what Machiavelli would call sovereign certainty. Their decisions come from their own analysis of what serves their long-term interests, aligned with their core values, considering the information available to them. They don't make decisions to please others, avoid criticism, or maintain social harmony. They make decisions that work, then handle whatever reactions those decisions create. This approach to life creates natural consequences that reinforce respect. When people realize they can't manipulate you through emotional pressure, they start approaching you with more honesty. When they understand that you won't change your standards to accommodate their comfort, they start meeting your standards instead of trying to lower them. When they see that you're genuinely indifferent to their approval or disapproval, they start working to earn the former and avoid the latter. The final stage of untouchable authority is what happens when people start protecting your reputation without you asking them to. When someone criticizes you in a group, others defend you. When someone tries to undermine you, others question their motives. When someone spreads rumors about you, others dismiss them as obviously false. This doesn't happen because you've been particularly nice to these people. It happens because you've been consistent, reliable, and strong in ways that made them respect you. Machiavelli wrote that the ultimate victory is winning without fighting. The untouchable person has achieved this in social dynamics. They don't have to argue for their worth because their presence demonstrates it. They don't have to defend their reputation because their actions have built it into something others want to protect. They don't have to demand respect because their consistency has made it automatic. This is the secret Machiavelli discovered about human nature. People don't respect what they can take for granted. They don't value what comes easily. They don't fear what poses no consequences. But when they encounter someone who operates from genuine strength, maintains clear boundaries, and seems immune to the social pressures that control everyone else, they respond with the kind of deep respect that can't be faked, forced, or manipulated into existence. They respond to power, and the ultimate power is not needing to prove you have it. The person who achieves this level of untouchable authority has transcended the need for external validation while paradoxically receiving more of it than they ever sought. They've become the kind of person others aspire to be, not because of what they have, but because of who they are. And that transformation from seeking respect to commanding it is the essence of Machiavellian mastery. You don't chase power, you become it.